What are you?
Good morning, everybody.
Well, lately I've been using
in keeping with everything, I'll start on time. So welcome to Learning Before Lunch. I don't have a microphone because we're testing the new lavalier microphone. So I'll try to, but mine is not interesting stuff anyways. Just make sure first turn off your phone so we don't have that. First of all, we want to thank the UNO Alumni Association. They provided for the space. They always do. The UNO Foundation provides us with the coffee and donuts. And another thing is that we had some invited guests from the Granaderos de Damas de Galvez and some UNO invitees too. So we made this a lanyard day. So there was no fees that we charged today. And so, but we want you, if you're interested in joining either one of these organizations, that there's a mailing list out there you can sign up if you're not getting any of the emails. So we encourage you to do that. Future speakers, we do that at the end, Dennis? Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll do that at the end. There is one thing. Last month at the yellow fever presentation, there was a lady in the audience who asked a question, I don't know if she's here, about her grandfather or great-grandfather who died in New Orleans of yellow fever. And then the discussion ensued about where it might be, and the discussion was, somebody said it was maybe by Morning Call coffee area. After I left, I thought about it and I realized that we're in the same vicinity, but if you go down towards Canal Street, towards City Park, right on the left, there's a Katrina memorial that was built there, and it's quite moving. But after a year of all the unidentified bodies after Katrina, they got together and built this memorial, and that's where they all were put because they were in the freezers of the funeral homes. But if you walk in there, there's a plaque, and it tells you that it's the charity cemetery, and it's typically in the back. There's a potter's field, but in there was buried either people that died that were unidentified, people who donated their bodies for research, and it also specifically says Spanish people who died of disease, including yellow fever. Oh. So if she's here, I hope that helps. But I think we're in the same vicinity. It's just I think that might be where it may be, but I don't know. We'll get into future speakers later, but let's get on to this. So Bobby Freeland is going to talk to you about the Spanish influence of New Orleans. He's originally from Brazil. He came to Tulane, and then after that worked for American Express and traveled South America, came back, retired in New Orleans, started investigating the history and the research of the history of New Orleans, and found a passion in the Spanish influence, specifically Bernardo de Galvez. So with that, I'm just going to move it over to him.
Thank you very much. Is the microphone perfect? Not too loud? Thank you. So yeah, John and I go way back. He's like I. We are overseas Americans. So he's an American that grew up in Mexico. I'm an American that grew up in Brazil. And he got plugged in. I came back for my 20-year reunion in 1996, and he was on the board of the Tulane Alumni Association. He says, boy, you should look into this. This keeps you active and it keeps you coming back to New Orleans. So for 4 years, when I lived in Puerto Rico from 98 to 02, I was on the board of the Tulane Alumni Association. I would come back. And it really connected me when I took an early retirement. I ended up being a volunteer with the Louisiana State Museum, the Friends of the Cabildo. And my first day in class, I step in, it's a tour guide class, and one of the ladies says, "You have an accent. Where are you from?" And I said, "Well, I grew up in Brazil, but I'm an American. I lived in Latin America, different countries." She says, "Finally, someone is going to be Bernardo de Galvez for those three galas." I had no idea what she was talking about. And she says, "Yeah, we have this fundraiser at Halloween. And no one wants to be Spaniards. They all want to be Frenchmen or Americans. So you're going to be the Spaniard." And so my first training, the lady that did the rehearsal, I read a couple of books on Galvez. I came into the rehearsal. I did my 7-minute spiel. And she says, "No, you don't understand. This is goes to Galvez. It's got to be blood and guts, corruption, bad things." So I speak Spanish. I went to Tulane's Latin American Library, read 2 biographies in Spanish on Galvez, and I came back to Annette. And I said, "Annette, he was clean as a whistle. Everybody loved him. He was a good family man. There's nothing bad about him. The only things I could find was that he allowed the Americans to smuggle arms up the river to George Rogers Clark in Kentucky, Illinois, Indiana, and to the Pittsburgh battalion of the Americans that were defeating the British at Fort Pitt." She says, "Okay, just focus on the smuggling now." And that has become my new career. And it just grows and grows and grows. So thank you very much for allowing me to present today a series. Now, I do have a question. How many are members of the Granaderos de Damas de Galvez here in the audience? There's about 5 or 6 of us. We're a new organization. It's open to anybody that's interested in the story. How many of you are affiliated as professors or staff of UNO? Okay, 1. My message is to her, because we're really appreciating the fact that a UNO-related organization is bringing us in. This is a story of Louisiana. It's not a story of Spain by itself, and you're going to see that in the presentation. And so you're going to see how we, the Granaderos, the organization that I'm basically representing, talks about the Galvez story, and then 2, how we at the museum systems, how we educate kids on the history of Louisiana that tends to be forgotten. So these are the objectives. How many of you have ever celebrated September 21st as a date that Louisiana fought for the American Revolution? Nobody. Yet it is a valid battle, and that's what we're going to talk about. It's forgotten support. If we go back to this presentation, Recovered Memories was an exhibit put up in the Cabildo. We're not rewriting history. We are recovering forgotten memories that happened, are there, are documented. Let's bring them up to the front. And then I'm going to talk about some of the programs upcoming. Some of them are open to the public, some are always looking for volunteers. And then how many of you have heard of the concept of America 250? A couple of you put your hand up. All of you are old enough, basically. How many of you have heard of the bicentennial? Same thing, just 50 years difference. And so we are at the forefront of prepping for America 250. And the Learning Before Lunch group asked me to discuss the America 250. I'm a member of the commission, so I'll update you on everything we're doing. The March of Galvez began on August 27th, 1779. So we are announcing our upcoming events called the March of Galvez 2023. It's our 2nd year to you guys in Learning Before Lunch. You're the first ones to hear of all of this. And I have a flyer just to give you an idea of one of my members says, I'm on a learning curve. No, you know more than I do. Start teaching us more. If you look on the form I have, September 4th, I had to add. Why? The group in Liberia, we have members in Liberia, They contacted me last night. They're gonna do an event. Labor Day, Monday, September 4th, because Francisco de Bolivia, the founder of New Iberia, was born on that day. They've never held an event like this in New Iberia. And that gives you an example of how fertile the ground in Louisiana is for really developing. Things that existed are there. All we have to do is begin celebrating them. So if UNO accepts every year that we come back and announce the Marcha de Galvez of the subsequent year, I have no problem in doing that because I'm the governor of the Granaderos and I'm empowered to negotiate with you guys. We thank you very much because look at the series of events we're going to be doing. Last year in 17 days, we've been held events in 5 parishes. Over 700 people came, from kindergartners all the way to people our age. And that's more or less what we're replicating here. This is the Friends of the Cabildo Spanish Heritage Program. I presented a while back to this same group via Zoom on Benito Juarez and the Cinco de Mayo connection to Louisiana. He lived here for 18 months in exile. So the museum program is more than just the Galvez program. What really changed everything was in 2018, a Spanish energy company put together an exhibit on Spain. One of the gentlemen here told me that they hadn't been to the Cabildo in about 40 years. Well, 6 years ago, the Spaniards took everything out, put a Spanish exhibit up for 3 months and took everything down. And when they came here, the historians, the art historians, they taught us volunteers and tour guides for the museum, the Spanish point of view of the American Revolution. And that's what I've done in this presentation. I took photos of the different images in the exhibit. The sequence I follow is the sequence that the exhibit, so if anybody here went to the exhibit, you're going to see a lot of the things from, and they could only keep it for 3 months because they had things like Robert Morris, the greatest financier of the American Revolution. His portrait was here in New Orleans. O'Reilly, Ulloa, Carondelet, Galvez portraits were in New Orleans, and then they all went back to their home museum. So that was a really great exhibit. The King of Spain came to New Orleans to see the exhibit. He came on Thursday night. Friday, he went to the museum. Then he went on to San Antonio. That's how important this exhibit was back then. Bibliography. I'm not going to go into in depth. You should read Accidental City by Larry Powell, the first Spanish period, fantastic. The Spanish in New Orleans and Louisiana was written by a council of Spain in the late 70s, and he was frustrated. He's here in New Orleans, no one remembers what we did. And so his book, it's easy to read. You can read the frustration in this man on what do I have to do to educate the citizens of the city that I represent my country in. It's a good book that way. And then Bernardo de Galvez by Cowie was written in the 1930s. It's still the best book on Galvez in New Orleans. Easy read. There are many more articles, books written about him. If you're going to do one, that's the one to do. And again, 1803, we became French again. Napoleon was only here for 20 days. Spain left, but the Canary Islanders are still here. And they are one of our most important partners in the Galvez story because they were brought here by Galvez. And then if you're really into the American Revolution, you read the others. This one here talks about how France and Spain allied themselves against England in support of the American Revolution. This was written about 2015, so it's got a lot of great information. The first part of the exhibit, Spain in the 17th century, 18th century. You know that saying, you never remember who took second place, only who took first place. Well, when I say the Industrial Revolution, it's England first, Spain was third. When I say the Renaissance, Italy first, right? When I say the Enlightenment, France first. Well, Spain was third in each one of those. And so they get lost in the mix, and you assume they had nothing to do. But the exhibit, the first section, talked about Spain in the 18th century. We know this from our Louisiana history. If we go to 1700, there were a series of wars that lasted over 100 years between France, which in 1700 is at its peak, Spain has begun its long decline, and England is beginning to rise. There are 4 different wars. American independence to us was the reason for fighting. In reality, as we're going to see, it was a world war. And then what's a twist is back in 1803 to 1815, England and Spain are against France under Napoleon. Louisiana participated in each one of these 4 wars, not as the United States, as France, as Spain, and the United States. And again, that's what makes Louisiana history so interesting. And it also makes, and again, I'm talking to the university people here, where do you put Louisiana history? Oh, we put it in the Louisiana history department. And how about that Spanish period? Oh, well, we really weren't ever Spanish, we did nothing in the Spanish period. So it gets left out. You go to Spanish history, where do they put Spanish history in the universities? In European history. Spain's a less important country. The 40 years that we were Spanish gets left out of European history. You go to Latin American history, no, New Orleans was never part of Latin America. Yes, we were part of Spain, Mexico. And so Louisiana is part of all these history departments, but they all have it such a minor marginal piece that we don't have our own place the way it should be. That's our argument in the beginning of this. The War of Spanish Succession, the last Habsburg dies. He doesn't have kids. Louis XIV puts his grandson, Felipe, as king of Spain. We've now in Spain become a Bourbon country. They sign a family pact. And basically at this point, the first pact in 1733, France is much stronger than Spain. The agreement is every time Britain attacks one of us, the other comes in. France puts up 2/3 of the money, Spain puts up 1/3. The American Revolution is part of the third family pact with a treaty known as the Tratado de Aranjuez. The 7 Years' War, which Americans call the French and Indian War, people like George Washington fought for the first time, is a war that really occurs around the world. It is considered the first world war. And France loses Canada, Louisiana, therefore has no more property in the northern hemisphere, just in the Caribbean. England took Cuba. Cuba was important to Spain, Florida wasn't. They gave Spain gave Florida to the English. So now you have 13 colonies, Florida and Canada, and Spain got Cuba back. And we become Spanish. So again, Louisiana is a very important piece in the 7 Years' War. This is our king, Charles III, not the one that's king of England today, but the king of Spain. And St. Charles Avenue is named after him. How many of us in this audience know that St. Charles Avenue, our most impressive avenue, is named after a Spanish king? I didn't rewrite history just now. It's forgotten history. In this portrait, he's a great grandson of Louis XIV. He was not supposed to be king of Spain. He was sent to Italy. He was a military man over there. You've got art in this painting. He was a very enlightened man. The actual king of Spain died, didn't have kids. Charles III becomes Spain. He is considered the greatest of the Bourbon kings. And if you're into Latin American history, he changed the way Latin America was managed from Madrid. Antonio de Ulloa, our first Spanish governor. What did the Francophones of Louisiana say? He was a wimp and we got rid of him. He was a weak governor. Yet he was one of the greatest scientists of his day. He didn't get punished for being kicked out of Louisiana. He got promoted. And during that American Revolutionary period, he was the commander-in-chief of Spain's Navy. He became very powerful after leaving. So Spain didn't send weaklings to New Orleans. They sent the best possible people. Alejandro O'Reilly. How do you Americans say? Alexander O'Reilly. He is an Irishman. The Irish and the Spain Catholics, they are, hate England. He rose all the way up to Count. He is a great Spaniard. He saved Puerto Rico and Cuba. He saved the life of Charles III, and he was the mentor of many of the Spanish governors that came to Louisiana. He's a great man. And how do we Francophones in Louisiana call him? Bloody O'Reilly. So spoiler alert for Ghostly Gallivant this year, the week before Halloween, I'm gonna be Bloody O'Reilly at the Cabildo. So pay attention and you'll learn the true story of Alejandro O'Reilly. This is the 13 colonies. They had it tough. 13 colonies surrounded by England, sort of far away from the friends, the Spanish. Benjamin Franklin, great diplomat. Thomas Jefferson, great diplomat. We always talk about France, France, France with those guys. And I'm not taking it away from the French. But the Count of Aranda was the Spanish ambassador in Paris. Where do you think Benjamin Franklin met with the other rebels? Didn't meet in public places in France because the French government could stop them. They met at the Spanish embassy, which was the property of Spain. And the Count of Aranda then, he becomes a fomenter with Ben Franklin and all that of the support to the American Revolution. Juan de Miralles was a Spaniard from Cuba. He becomes the official first ambassador. Diego de Gardoqui is when the United States is now independent, the Spanish ambassador to the United States. Only two foreigners were invited to George Washington's inaugural, the Marquis de Lafayette and Diego de Gardoqui. This was the suit the Gardoqui wore at Washington's inauguration. It was at the Cabildo in 2018. Now that was the impression that we all got that were involved. Everything was brought to New Orleans for a 3-month period. These men, Pollock based in New Orleans, a Spanish Irishman, Robert Morris in Philadelphia, the Count of Aranda, they were businessmen. They were partners in international trade. They knew the routes, they knew where the money was, they had the contacts, everything was done by shipping. They, as allies, are what made the American Revolution a success. New Orleans and Oliver Pollock are part of that story, and we tend to downplay it. This is next to the Royal Orleans Hotel. There is a plaque saying this is the site of where Oliver Pollock lived. He's the man that smuggled the guns up the river. He invented the dollar sign. He and Robert Morris had this relation. You take the Spanish piece of 8 that has the Pillars of Hercules, you can see the sashes around the Pillars of Hercules. So back then, you did business in various currencies, depending on what country you were dealing with. The Spanish coinage was that important. What he did was he put the pillars, the sash. Thomas Jefferson, when he is working for George Washington, comes up with the American currency. He hated the British system. He created a decimal system. So the dollar is 100, the piece of 8 is 8. But you combine the two and you put the dollar sign because Robert Morris worked with Jefferson on the creation of the American currency. So New Orleans has a direct connection to the dollar sign and the creation of American currency through Oliver Pollock. My friend, there's a friend of mine over here that's from Philadelphia. Well, Fort Pitt was freed by guns smuggled up the river. My father is from 32 miles west of Vincennes, Indiana. My hero in the American Revolution is George Rogers Clark. He freed the upper Mississippi from the British using Spanish arms. Fort Genevieve, Fort Chartres, St. Louis, all of those were part of Spain at the time. So the Americans are beginning to take the upper Mississippi, 78, early 79. Vincennes Rendezvous, every year, they pushed it to Memorial Day. They have massive events celebrating George Rogers Clark. You know what they don't talk about? The Spanish. If you talk to the historians, they know that it was with Spanish arms. And you guys, again, talking to a French audience, I went last year and the Boy Scouts have barbecue. You know what the dessert was? Beignets. A women's organization was serving fried chicken. You know what the dessert was? bread pudding. And there is still a French heritage in Vincennes. So my father's from the American Illinois side. They don't even know what a beignet is. But if you're one of the French people from Vincennes, you're still eating those same desserts that your ancestors were. And what the superintendent of the national park told me is there is a movement for America 250 of the French influence coming out of Canada, and it's coming down the river. Well, Louisiana can jump on board and make a massive participation on the French heritage of the United States, because no state is as French as we are. There's another organization, the Trail of Lafayette. 50 years after the American Revolution, Lafayette comes back to the United States, and everywhere he touched, there's going to be an event. And so he stayed at the Cabildo, he got off down by Buras. They're beginning to trail where this man went in Louisiana. Pay attention to it, because for 2026, we're going to see a lot more. It was a world war, and it was a naval war. For us, it was battles on the 13 colonies. For Spain, France, and England, it was a massive war. The deal is Spanish ships protect French islands. French ships protect George Washington. So in our history books, we talk about the French admirals, not the Spanish admirals, because to us in the 13 colonies, we really didn't see them. We do have some naval officers of importance. Pierre-Georges Rousseau was sent by Washington to serve under Galvez. So a Frenchman serving under an American ends up serving under a Spaniard in New Orleans. Makes all the sense in the world. Jorge Farragut. Did I say it right? I said it right. His kid is born in this area. He becomes an American. We call him David Farragut. So his father, a Spaniard, fought in the Navy, was a friend of Claiborne, came into Louisiana with Claiborne. So David Farragut actually grew up in New Orleans. That's again another Spanish connection to the American Revolution. The third section in the exhibit is the support of Louisiana. This is who I am. So I have to get a new uniform because I've been wearing this one for 15 years. It's the only image I ever found of Galvez with a mustache. I'm not going to shave my mustache. There is a Spanish historian, Cabildo, who I met a couple of months ago at the Historic New Orleans collection. And someone had introduced me and said, oh, he does Galvez. And he looked at me and says, Galvez never had a mustache. So, you know what? I got this image. I'm sticking to my story. Craig DeFerro, parish president, is the only person of importance that when you saw me as Galvez, is you're too old to be Galvez. Because I'm 69 years old and Galvez died at the age of 40. So there are things that I'm sticking to, even though certain people pick on me. Canary Islands. And this part of the presentation, when I say Canary Islanders, I don't want you to think of Emma Lazarus, your huddled masses. I want you to think of Leonidas and the Spartans. 200, 300, whatever the number was, that's what we're going to talk about now. So at the time, the Canary Islands is a stopping off point. So you guys that travel by airplane to leave New Orleans, how often do you go straight to the destination? Almost never. Houston, Atlanta. Tenerife was the same thing back in the shipping days. You left Europe, you went to the Canary Islands, then you came to the New World. So even Benjamin Franklin, every time he went back and forth, he had to stop off in the Canary Islands. The population at the time was the same as Philadelphia. That's how important Tenerife was at the time. In the mid-1800s, economic problems developed. And that's where in Louisiana we get the myth that all those poor Canary Islanders, they had to find a place to live because of their economy was going downhill. I'm going to show you the other side of the story. Matias de Galvez is Bernardo's father. He arrives in Tenerife at the age of, in 1757. He's a businessman for the government. He serves 21 years in different positions. And he is promoted to Governor General in Guatemala, covering Central America, and then was promoted to the Virrey of New Spain, the top position in the Americas. And during the American Revolution, that I'm going to talk about, Bernardo is defeating the British over here, George Washington is defeating him over there, Matias is defeating them in Central America. And the British at the time were going to take everything. And that's the importance of the Galvez family in this overall story. Bernardo is born in Macharabiaya. Even you guys that speak Spanish, say it fast. It's not easy. You have to practice it because it's got a lot of syllables. They have one of the biggest 4th of Julys in the world because they do everything. The economy is geared towards the Galvez story. Wow. At the age of 11, he moves to the Canary Islands. We know from letters and all that he kept on going back. And in 1762, he's 15 years old, he joins the military. At that age, what do? You don't go to college, very few, you join the military. He fought under O'Reilly in Algiers. He fought in Portugal, and he made his name in Mexico. He accompanied his uncle, Jose de Galvez, who was became the Minister of Indies under Charles III. And if you know your Latin American history, you have the Viceroy, you have different positions. You have an Intendente, which is like the guy, the auditor that keeps an eye on the corrupt politicians. And Jose goes to Mexico as a visitador. He is like a McKinsey consultant. Something's not working. I'm here to say what has to be done, and you follow my orders because I am the visitador. And that is the man that trained Bernardo de Galvez. From Gilbert Din's The Cabildo, he has the org chart as Louisiana would have fit into an existing Spanish hierarchy. So Bernardo is the governor. His boss is the Captain General in Havana. His boss is his father in Mexico City, whose boss is his brother in Madrid, whose boss is the King of Spain. Galvez was not nepotism, some flunky sent over here. He was one of the most important families. And again, go back to the Bourbon reforms. These were not high nobility that because they were noble, they got the job. Under Charles III, only the best people rose in the government. And this family is the family that really did it. So anyway, one other thing. Everything he sent to his bosses, he had to copy his uncle. And his uncle was always in contact with the king. The king knew everything that was happening in New Orleans. So under the French period, we were a colony that the French didn't know what to do with us from an economic point of view. In the Spanish period, before we started making money, we were one of the most strategic points Spain had in the Americas. And that's our importance under Galvez. The exhibit, we talked about the Spanish troops. So Spain had Afro-Louisianians or Afro-Spaniards in the regular army. Red and white uniform, white. We're going to see the different uniforms that different units wore. The Regimiento de Louisiana, Infanteria de Louisiana, was the name of the military that served here. And they covered Florida as well. And they served as far as Illinois. And this is the uniform. So we're seeing different uniforms. But the Regiment of Louisiana, where the word Louisiana wasn't just what we imagine today as Louisiana, it covered the Spanish Empire. In 1779, we know that war is going to be declared on England. The Americans declare war in 76. France supports the Americans in 78. So Galvez is told you can create a second battalion. The first battalion were people from Peninsulares, people from the peninsula. The second battalion, we're going to send you 700 Canary Islanders. And who's handpicking the 700? Matias. You think he's going to send garbage? to Louisiana to fight for his son? No, they chose the best possible people. And Galvez knew many of the people. So the moment I am chosen, I am now a military man. I am on the salary and the payroll. I am being trained to fight the British. So that's why I said it's not the huddled masses coming through Ellis Island. These were people that were handpicked. 700 is the number. They allowed married men to come. If you're into the Canary Islands, it's different islands. Most of ours came from a couple of islands. The Canary Islands of Louisiana trace what ship their ancestor came on. It is an amazing understanding of their heritage. Every March, they have the fiesta. They still maintain their culture. If you haven't been, go next year. Yes, they have Latin American music. Yes, they have Canary Island food, but they have these historic booths and genealogists and all that. Just go in there and ask questions, and it's amazing what they do. Some of those ships made it right away. Some got stopped. Some got taken by the British. So it was very difficult for them to arrive here. In July of '79, Galvez reports the 1,500 people that arrived here. 150 of the 700 are bachelors. You serve in the military regiment. 329, you're married men. You're going to serve in the militia. We're going to give you land. In the history books, they brought people from Spain. Well, turns out, and this is where I come to my UNO archivists and all that, they were from Mexico and Cuba. But at the surface, we call them Spaniards. There is all this work being done now that there are Mexicans and Cubans that actually participated in the American Revolution as Spaniards serving under Galvez in Louisiana. But the records are lost because as we become American and they continue being part of Spain and then Latin America, all those genealogical records are distributed throughout the region. Militias, you know, as Americans, we think of the Minutemen. This is in a way a step up. You have this big territory. You have to have military presence. So you develop a system that before the 7 Years' War resulted in the loss of Cuba. We're going to change that. We Spaniards are going to change it. We're going to make a serious militia structure. It is going to be plugged in directly into, right? So our Minutemen were our force. They weren't part of the British Army. They were part of an American army that wasn't. Spain was different. Our militias in Louisiana were part of the military structure. They fit right in. Anybody that was anybody, you had your own militia to serve in. You were given incentives to serve, so it was an honor. All able-bodied men technically had to serve, but the better you were, the more position you got, the more incentives you were paid. They did train these men properly. Some of the militias were big enough to create their own names, and there is a history. But a lot can be done in Louisiana history on the individual details of each one of these different groups. And one of the interesting things is in this here, I'm going to go through 3 or 4 pages on uniforms. The dragoons are mounted. We know that the Dragones de Mexico, they brought them specifically from Mexico. These guys knew how to ride horses. The Africans were used in different positions. You had the regiment, fixed regiment, red and white uniform, but you also had specialists. And in the siege of Pensacola, the tiradores de montaña are like the Tennessee sharpshooters that served under Jackson and decimated the British. So all of these groups we know exist on the surface because you look at the rosters and all it has is the names in the unit, but there's no history written on what these people did, where they came from, and when they quit serving, where did they go and what's happened. And so a lot of the whites become Cajuns, become Creoles, become whatever in Louisiana. The white research is easier to follow. Africans in the Spanish period are Catholic. And this again comes to the university as we're trying to find what more is done by Africans in our history. When you're Catholic, you are baptized, married, and buried in the church. The records exist on Afro-Louisianans. As we become American, we don't care about the blacks. We don't keep the documentation properly. And that segment of Spanish Louisianians that fought for the American Revolution, we don't know what happened to many of them. We know they served because we have the roster at the time. So all of this is a big chunk of what can be done. And everything I'm saying here, how many of you are members of the Sons of the American Revolution or the Daughters of the American Revolution? Only one. In Louisiana, and I'll talk about that, that's not a problem, there's only one, is that Louisiana now, if you served under Galvez, you can join the Sons of the American Revolution or the Daughters of the American Revolution. Where did your patriot come from?
Virginia.
Virginia, so he knows clearly, I'm 13 colonies. The Louisianians, many of the Louisianians, they joined because they were part of the, let's say, the Cajun militia, the German Coast militia. So the SAR accepts them as heroes, but they don't know really the history. Because his ancestor fought for George Washington and, you know, whoever the generals were, there's a clear history of it. Over here, the Galvez story, we lost it. And so what's interesting as Granadero, mine is an open organization. As I start doing presentation to SAR groups and DAR groups, they're learning the reason their ancestor fought. And one thing is, if you guys start doing research, you do all the research on your individual family, so you are into it. But there's 20 family members that, oh, my grandfather's doing that, my mother's and grandmother's doing it. The rest of the family really doesn't understand. And that's the audience of the Granaderos, is know, you know, your grandfather, your grandmother, they're doing something important because this was part of Louisiana history. And that's the whole mission of the Granaderos, is to bring this up. German Coast Militia. And then here's a new project, and this is where we want UNO, and you're going to get all the UNO requests. This is from an Osprey military book showing the different troops that fought under Spain, different uniforms. We talked about it. Here's an African-American woman, Afro-Louisianan, Afro-Cuban, who knows? What is she? She's a camp follower. When I say camp follower, what comes to mind? Huh? How can you call Florence Nightingale and Clara Barton prostitutes? That's what you just did, right? Camp followers. But what happens to history books? What women did is not important.
Right.
Boom, they're written out of the history books. So one of the things that Granadiers are trying to do, what were the camp followers doing? There is a book on Marie Félicité St. Maxime d'Estrahan, the widow d'Estrahan that married Galvez. It's in Spanish, there is no history written about her. So the only two things that you can find are historical fiction. Now, we know that Galvez won the Battle of Pensacola in May of '81. 9 months later, he is in Haiti, getting ready to attack Jamaica. Marie Félicité gives birth to a child in Haiti on a ship. So that means Marie Félicité was with her husband through all of his theaters, but we don't know, because our image of camp followers, no one knows. And so what we're trying to do with the Granadiers, we have a whole program with women at the time. We're assuming that this poor woman, camp follower, probably took orders from this woman, the wife of the general. And all of that history of what the women were doing as camp followers is a big project for us. So if any of you are interested in joining the Granadiers and helping us research what women are doing, it's a big subject. The war starts. Britain is now at war with Spain. Galvez gets information in August. Remember, the war is declared in April. 4 months later, he gets it. But you know what the good news is? Upriver, The British didn't get it because Galvez stopped all the information going upriver, so he knew war had been declared. This is the theater of the Galvez troops. I can't see out the window, but technically speaking, I can look over here. You know what I'm looking at? I'm looking at England. So in Philadelphia, London, France, Paris, Madrid, the borders between the countries is sort of theoretical and at a distance. For Bernardo de Galvez in New Orleans, it's right there. And that's the strategic importance of New Orleans. Economically, we always say, oh, it wasn't that important, but if you're going to control the river, you control the inside of the United States, and you put your best person to do that. And what did Galvez do? This map is from a gentleman named Stephen Kling. This one is from the National Park Service. This is Baton Rouge. Baton Rouge is England. New Orleans is Spain. He puts half of the Canary Islanders here. They're still there in the Donaldsonville area, Gonzales. And he puts some of them in St. Bernard and Lafitte. If the British attack us this way, the militias stop it. Remember, these aren't poor immigrants. These were trained militia that, by the way, also had a farm. And the same thing over here. If they come down to Baton Rouge, our militias will stop them. He begins his march. This is what it would have looked like. This is an artist's rendition. Galvez, white man, white and blue. You have a black man over here, red uniform. He would have been regular troops. You have a black man over here. He would have been one of the colored, free colored men militias. White man, blue and white. You have the Native American, the Choctaws, the different tribes. And here you have another militia man. And so this is an artist's rendition. Galvez leaves New Orleans, August 27th. What day was the Battle of Baton Rouge? Come on, guys, you saw it.
21st.
The 21st of September. That's how long it took. So everybody complains about going to Baton Rouge. We have it easy. Manchac was his first battle. This is where the Louisiana troops fought for the first time. Unfortunately, the fort no longer exists. You know how the river curves? It's now in the middle of the river. It's near St. Gabriel. There's a church called the St. Gabriel Church, built in 1776. Galvez prayed there before attacking Baton Rouge. I do school programs with kids in the Iberville Parish High School, which is right there on about half a mile away in Dutchtown. No one's ever told them that Galvez prayed in that church. It's a historic building. Half a block away, the kids could walk on a field trip. And we the Grenadiers were building up the story of the St. Gabriel Church. So this is what is today the Pentagon Barracks. This is a battle game done by Stephen Kling. He's from St. Louis. His focus is how St. Louis participated in the American Revolution. It was part of Spain at the time. So he's building up the Spanish presence in the upper Mississippi. So this is what's beautiful for our story in the Grenadiers. This here is the Capitol Park area. We, the Grenadiers, have our annual meeting in November. We've got people from all over coming. We're calling the visit to this area to visit the battlefield. Because September 21st, the British are over here in what is today the Pentagon Barracks. Galvez over here, a little bit further down, I just didn't have a good enough picture. A little bit under the blue arrow where the Capitol Park Museum is, that's where he had his real cannon. Over here, which is the Memorial Park area, if you know it well, by the garrison, Galvez suckered the British like the Americans did before D-Day. You had that second, quote unquote, preparation area. The Germans focused on that. Well, the British focused all their cannons on this area. On September 21st, when Galvez starts firing the cannons, they're shooting this way, and the British couldn't turn the cannons around in time. He won the Battle of Baton Rouge. And you know, it's one of these things, because you're all from New Orleans. Was the Battle of New Orleans under Jackson an important battle? Oh, no, it wasn't. He lucked out. No. These guys, they knew what they were doing. they suckered their enemy into a way that they made something important look easy, therefore it's not important. No, no. The Battle of Baton Rouge was super important. He takes Mobile, and then he takes Pensacola. And if any of you ever been to Pensacola, they have that big bay. And this exhibit was also part of the exhibit. Over here, you have Galvez, and you have all the Spanish ships. There was an admiral that was in charge of the Navy. And he said, there's no way we're going to take Pensacola. I refuse to authorize my ships to go there. Galvez had one ship, the Galvez. And he said, yo solo, I alone, will show you it can be done. And he entered the bay, and by the third one here, you can see that all the Spanish ships are now attacking the British ships. And when I say he took Pensacola, oh yeah, that's a little rinky-dink resort area that we go to from New Orleans. At the time, if you look at the map, Pensacola is the location from where Britain attacked Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. And so Pensacola was super important to the British. It also supplied the Mississippi River. They celebrate May 8th in Pensacola with a lot of presents. And these stars designate other battles that the Regiment of Louisiana fought away from Louisiana. This is very important. We Louisianians were much more important than just what the state is today. This is what the United States looked after, after Galvez. He is promoted to a count. He becomes a general, promoted, and this is a famous portrait of him, and he's got a letter in his hand. If you can read Spanish, it's from his father. Remember the signature. My dear son, congratulations on your victories. Do not let them go to your head. You owe your success to God and to the King that supplied you with the resources. And the message, and going back to that conversation with Annette Watt, he was clean as a whistle. This man now is 36 years old. He's at the peak of his career. His father's still telling him, you have to be humble, you have to be a good person. And that's the Galvez family. And I'm not Spanish, right? I'm half American, half Brazilian. Spain was my enemy. I lived in Latin America. Spain was the enemy. It's when I come to New Orleans and I read Larry Powell's book, you know what? Spain wasn't so bad. And then John fact-checked me one time, because John grew up in Mexico City, and Galvez built the Castillo Chapultepec, which is one of the symbols of Mexico City. And one day after the first presentation, you sent me an email saying, yeah, here's the link to the fact that Galvez was the man behind Chapultepec. And what happens? He dies at the age of 40. Can you imagine had this man lived? He's like a Chet Morrison. I'm a fanatic of Chet Morrison, who died at 52 and had brought Latin America back into New Orleans in a way that after he died, we lost our connections to Latin America once again. So there are statues of Galvez in New Orleans, Washington, Pensacola. Our statue in New Orleans is being refurbished. It will come up. We'll keep you posted. We have Galvez Street, St. Bernard Parish. So one of the things I need help from the universities, when I go as Galvez in St. Bernard, they do an event at the museum, third and fourth graders. Fourth grade teacher, I say, the other students, I say, St. Bernard is named after me because I'm dressed as Galvez. And the teacher told me, well, we can't teach that. It's not in the curriculum. Nothing wrong with that. She didn't say, I'm not going to teach it. She was critiquing the curriculum she has to use. It doesn't say it. The third grade teacher told me, I can teach that because I teach social studies and we're more flexible. I deal with the Department of Education, World Languages Unit. They are in charge of Spanish and French through all the public schools in the state. Melissa Monroe's my contact name. She says, you can talk about whatever you want because the Spanish curriculum guidelines simply say culture and history of the countries that speak Spanish. Therefore, so one of the things again with UNO, can we work with you guys? And there are works with the curriculum. If you look at the history curriculum, it's focused on what happened in the 13 colonies. And they could add a paragraph. Bernardo de Galvez in Spanish Louisiana was an integral part. Last week, there was a ceremony at the Capitol Park Museum in Baton Rouge. What did they inaugurate? There is a place called Memorial Park, which is all related to the American Revolution, right next to the Capitol building. They put up a monument honoring the Africans that served in American history. And it starts with the Battle of New Orleans. We, the Granaderos, lost an opportunity because we should have been part and has said Louisiana was not American until 1803, but Louisiana fought for the American Revolution. And I'm not rewriting history, it's a true statement. And I hope you all agree with that aspect of what the Granaderos like. In Galvez, we have Galvez Plaza, right by the old, so the old Capitol building's here, this is the library. There's a mural. The Marcha de Galvez, it's called. Recently, we did a 4th of July. No, what do you do 4th of July, you guys? You go watch fireworks. How many of you actually go celebrate 250 years of American independence? We don't. And so what we did was, this lady here, she went ahead. Her husband is a private in the regiment of Louisiana. So she didn't get, like most ladies do, get a gown of a plantation owner. She went, this is what her Cajun wife to a Spanish soldier would have worn. She was a farm woman. And so she inaugurated her dress, and we did the Galvez. We got 34 people show up. We had 2 weeks to announce it. So it's like fertile ground. When you start throwing water, things sprout up. The Galvez story in Louisiana is going to take off. And I'm going to end with this piece here. And again, UNO has a university. Galvez was made an honorary citizen. And then I'm done with the presentation. Can you read this? Galvez was made the 8th honorary citizen of the United States. It is a law. Anything in green is a positive. And this is taken direct from the law. Why do I have a name in red? He's from Florida. Good news is he's from Pensacola, so Galvez won the Battle of Pensacola, therefore he gets in. What's bad about this one? Only one Louisiana congressman signed. Charles Bustani, he is a Christian Lebanese, which was part of the French. I can just imagine when his grandparents immigrated to Louisiana. No, they always told me that we were French. We were never Spanish. Why should I sign that law? The Floridians signed it in January. Took them that much time. Every congressman from the state of Florida signed. Pedro Pierre Luisi, because Florida is controlled by the Cubans. Pedro Pierre Luisi is a Puerto Rican, but he had a dual reason. He's not a congressman, but he sits in Congress as a resident commissioner. He's a Tulane alum. He's now governor of Puerto Rico. So we have a chance with the Galvez story to connect soon with this guy. And Bustani was the last one. So it took an extra 3 weeks for one Louisiana congressman to sign. This is the rest of the law. This is the rest of the law. We're proud in Louisiana that we have all these different people supporting the American history. And there is a horrible, horrible, horrible mistake in here, and it's in the law. Who can tell me what it is?
Talking about Great Britain instead of England?
No. He didn't seize the port of New Orleans. He used New Orleans as his base to attack the British. He used New Orleans to supply the Americans. And because no one from Louisiana knows our history, we allowed Texans, Floridians, and a Spanish senator who threw that in as a joke, thinking somebody in Louisiana was going to pick up on it. To me, you guys are all at the end of your careers. How can we work with you guys at UNO and the young students? We've got to improve our knowledge of Louisiana history. And with that, basically, this is the end of the law. And again, it's everything talking about Bernardo de Galvez, but they sort of left us out of the story. They end up with Galvez, Louisiana, St. Bernard Parish, are named after him. And then the state of Florida goes ahead and is honored Bernardo de Galvez with a great Floridian. And I don't think we have support yet in the state of Louisiana to do this, but this would become a project of the Granaderos to get Galvez better known. And you guys are helping us with that. So I know that my time limited, right, John?
Yes, sir.
We do have a series of events coming up.
You might want to just quickly do the American 250.
Okay. America 250 is 2026. And again, I'm speaking to UNO. You do have a commissioner of higher education on the commission. It's Sam Hyde from Southeastern in Hammond. So he's representing all the universities. And the federal government has created an organization. The state of Louisiana has created an organization. We have just signed our contract with the national. We're going to start receiving input, funds, projects, all types of things. So from a UNO perspective, start paying attention to different aspects, what they're doing. And Sam Hyde is your person. I was able to get a position for the Granaderos on the commission. And so basically I represent the Spanish side of Louisiana's history of the American Revolution. Any help, I'm representing the commission now. We've started this year. We just had our 5th meeting last week, and our next meeting is going to be on September 21st in Baton Rouge. And past commissions, we have had things it was mostly Baton Rouge. I don't know what New Orleans did. I lived here at the time. I was a college student. And there are resources that are becoming available for universities to access. And Annie Mahoney, who is the secretary of the commission, she uses this. America 250 is 2026, but the project exists right now. There are funds available, there are programs available, and too many members of the commission, and other states are even worse than us, they're waiting for 2026 to do something. And technically, we could do it right now, right? 2026 is when the declaration is celebrating the Declaration of Independence. But we've had Concord, we've had all these events prior, and it goes all the way until after the, so it's a long-term project that we can take advantage of. With that, I'm done.
All right. Normally we would say that this is good for New Orleans when it's raining, but we haven't seen rain in so long. This is our gift to you. It's a Learning Before Lunch umbrella.
Perfect, thank you.
And just a quick thing is we did have Zoom people, and I forgot to mention at the beginning that they were online, and we're trying to keep that going. Future speakers in September, we got Vincent Terry. He's going to do the history of aviation. October, Nick Mueller is going to be talking about the World War II Museum and the founding of that. November, then we have Liz Scott, who is Modine, who writes Modine for New Orleans magazine, and so that's about it. I don't think we have time for questions. If you want to throw one, go ahead.
So what's the history department doing? I'm gonna want this and I want to know.
For what?
What is the UNO history department doing? I'm a graduate of this university and I want to know because I'm going over there after this.
I'm speaking to you as a potential volunteer.
No, actually, I can't get that book out.
Yeah, I'll get the money. I want to know what they're doing.
John and Dennis invited me to meet with the provost. So he knows more or less what we're doing. My friend over here from the archives I'm hoping when I spoke to you on the things that you can disseminate this to the rest of the university. You as a volunteer, alumnus, donate money to Louisiana programs, and I'm not a UNO alumnus, I'm just explaining the way to do it. Get involved. I have applications for the Granadeiros y Damas de Galvez. Become a member, because we have a series of school field trip programs coming to the Capitol Park Museum in Baton Rouge, the Isleño Museum in St. Bernard, and the Cabildo, and for the Spanish Heritage Program. And we teach them as they go through the Cabildo, everything that we just saw in this presentation. I can show you French history, American history, but we focus on the Spanish heritage of Louisiana in the Cabildo. So we're always looking for volunteers. That's what you can do for my organization, UNO. Try to figure out how you can help. And again, if Louisiana does it right, am I going to go to Kansas and learn about America 250, or Washington State, which might be a very modern state, or do I go to Connecticut, which was one of the 13 colonies? All have little pieces of 250 years of American history. Louisiana has the best history of the 250 years and before. So the Baton Rouge Capitol Park area, what they call the mounds, that's a pyramid. You can see clearly. Unfortunately, the Galvez plaque is up on top of the second level. Many of you couldn't walk up to the second level to see the, and it's raining, all bets are off. The LSU mounds, right, famous mounds, those are 5,000 years old. They finally closed them so that the kids don't roll around on them. What you should do is build a replica of what the mountain would have looked like 5,000 years ago. So Louisiana has this history that no one else has. That's what you can do with the Louisiana History Department of UNO. There's so much that they can do. And if you keep on asking me questions, they'll take 5 minutes each one. So I'm shut up.
You'll be around. Thank you very much.
Louis?
Thank you. You got it?
Sons of the American Revolution. I applied and I got the application and I got lost.